Looks playable.
35 is bet. Calls 35.
With a pair and the button here, I think this is pretty easy flat.
This is actually kind of an interesting squeeze spot for me, but I think at a table this tough, I have to show some discipline and knock it out of line.
Generally, my playability is going to decrease multi-way. If I keep using that rationalization of playability for playing more hands pre, I think it's worth taking a second and talk about how I'm going to achieve more playability post. It's generally going to happen in one of a few different ways. Either I'm going to be able to value bet too thin, value bet for too much when I make a big hand, or I'm going to get too much realization by checking down. That's harder to make happen multi-way because I'm at a bigger range disadvantage versus the enemy unit. In other words, the three of them combined. So my realization power shrinks a lot. That being said, I flop a way above average texture for this specific hand. It's not necessarily as good as it looks though up against three opponents. I think I can get in a lot of trouble if I start building a pot here out of position with how often this board changes from turn to river. So I think I actually just have to take the conservative route here and check and try to use sound bluff catching efficiency across all three streets.
So I'm concerned my range is a little bit transparent based on not giving any commentary on the pre-flop call. I think I probably look a little pair dense because these lower pairs are going to be less of an argument for any other action pre-flop. So that's concerning, but less concerning since I have top set. So this board I need a ton of protection. I think any hand I bet I'm going to be choosing larger sizing, so I'm going to bet just under pot here, for obviously a combination of value and protection.
First, I'll start with jacks flat of nicks under the gun raise. I think it is heavily weighted towards pairs and mostly pairs, not as many suited connectors, just because I think with the three people that are on his left, he understands he's going to get squeezed a lot. So weighting him heavily at pairs, I think that either end of this draw, if I hit, is good. And there will be a lot of cards that I can take this away from him on later streets as well. I anticipate that Nick would have bet with, I actually think he might have a pretty balanced check raise here, or checking range here. So I am slightly fearful that he has a big pair and could check raise, but I still think he has plenty of combinations of hands that are just check folding on this board. So I am going to call.
Multi-way, my hand becomes much less playable when two bets go into the pot, basically just because my realization is kind of slashed. Multi-street games include the multi-street burden of realization, so the best way to explain it is my hand is much less playable with two streets left to come than one street left to come. For that reason, I think my two options are basically fold or raise. I think calling is the worst of the two. I'm not all that confident that raising is going to perform very well out of position against two opponents, especially for the reason I gave before, that the board can complicate in a way that's really unfavorable to the out of position player. I think I basically just have to surrender here. Anything else just seems too ambitious.
So Jai's flat is interesting, and I think very good. He has two players left to act behind, and the draw heavy board is going to favor him just because of his position against me. And so I think that he could have a lot of different types of hands when he flats here. I think lower sets are not as likely since those are the hands that need the most protection, although I do think he would have them at some frequency. Two pairs are perhaps too weak to raise over my sizing with two players left to act. But I think he could definitely have a number of types of hands, pair plus draw, flush draw, straights. I think he would raise a lot of a 7-6 on such a draw heavy board, but he'll definitely have some. I think he would not flat ace deuce offsuit on the button. That's my hunch. And I think, of course, he would only have 6 deuce suited. I do think he could have all 7-6 offsuit flatting on the button, which is a sizable part of, I think, his continuing range. That being said, I think my hand is strong enough to bet call, and there's enough hands that I want to charge, and I don't want to give a free card. I think I'm doing well enough against his calling range that a bet and a call is very much justified. But I could be in a gross spot on the river for sure.
All right, another reason that I call on the flop is because I think that a lot of the time he's going to be checking the turn, especially if he elected to bet a hand like, say, a shackle of clubs or something along those lines. When he barrels again here, I just think that I don't think I have the equity that I need in order to call here. I have 4 outs that I deem to most definitely be good, of which I think it's very feasible Nick could have check folded one of them, and I'm unsure if the deuce or 6 is good. I think he would bet 7s here, and I think he would also bet 6s again. So for that reason, with those still being in his range, I think that I just have to let this go on the turn. I think that a lot of the time a card that is scary for him can come on the turn and slow him down, and I'm able to steal the pot that way. Say, for instance, a 5 or a 7, or possibly any diamond.
So seat 1 is Jack, and I know him a little bit through like the East Coast scene. Like I know he lives in New York and he plays some underground games with like some people I know.
Jack and Zach, they run Just Hands. They play 1-2 and 2-5, and I know they do very well at those stakes. This is the first time I played with them.
From what I know of his game and like listening to his podcasts and things like that, they were very like in the GTO camp, hard that way, at least until they met us.
What I knew about him prior to hiring him was that he was super analytical.
Jack's trajectory should be like very good, and his ceiling should be pretty high.
I think he's going to be playing very straightforward with tight ranges, and he's not going to get out of line.
He's not going to make a lot of big errors. He also probably won't go for big home runs.
Getting to know him a little bit better, it seems like that is true that he has a good foundation in GTO, but it also seems like, you know, he understands the live environment really well and knows that deviations and exploitations are where a lot of the money is made.
I really like the guy. He's one of those kids, he's hungry, he's young, he's trying, and like he works hard. He reminds me a lot of like when I was that age and like trying to learn and stuff like that.
So in this spot with this exact hand, I'm always going to be 3-betting. I think Matt is opening many hands in this position. Perhaps too many for this lineup, maybe not. But yeah, I'm just looking to get value. I think he's going to be calling 3-bets pretty wide. So I'm going to size up a little bit here. Normally I'd go a little under 3x, but I think I'm going to go closer to 4x in this spot as a result of that.
185.
So this is always a fun spot. High-fiving him right now would be very rude, but we got the Cowboys. Obviously, all options are available to us. We're rather deep, and I imagine that he's constructing rather wide, which is gonna incentivize me to want to have a 4-bet range here, especially since the game's been playing rather pre-flop heavy. I think it would be foolish to pass on a spot to work in a very strong 4-bet. So this is kind of a layup. We're gonna size to about 20% of stacks, giving him plenty of room to just jam through or call, both of which are good for us.
585 is the bet.
So I think this is a pretty good sizing the spot from Matt, especially if he wants to be 4-betting a bit more of like a merge value range, not just have maybe like queens plus ace king, which I think is probably what he's doing based on what I know about his strategy. The stacks are a little bit awkward here for me. Against the way Matt plays, I'm always getting it in here, and the question is just, how do I get more value against kind of the weaker part of his value range that maybe is 4-betting like potentially tens, but I think very likely jacks, ace queen suiteds, and then also potentially seeing if there's a way for me to get continued value from bluffs. So we're about 3,000 effective, and he is making it 585. So the question is there a sizing I could pick where I could realistically 5-bet fold? And I think there is. So if I click it back to I think between 12 and 13, I could do that. But yeah, I think it's a hand I'm just always going with. It's not necessarily standard for me in all lineups, but against Matt, I think queens were just pretty happily getting it in here. So 1275.
1285 is the bet.
Okay, so he's 5-bet to half his stack. The problem is I think he still has folds, but I won't have any 6-bet bluffs. He has 1,600 behind, and if I flat, SPR would be about 0.66. So I think this is kind of a layup spot to not concern myself with protection and take what appears to be a really attractive price and hope that he thinks I'm making mistakes here. I'm very likely to just open jam any flop, and I would likely just check call off on an ace high board.
I don't know what's happening, but Berkey's caging the shit out of this kid.
So this board texture is actually ideal because I could still have some width to my shoves. If I ever have small, medium pairs that I'm playing strangely like this, or more importantly, my ace-5, my ace-3s, etc. So I'm gonna be all in. All in?
Players all in? All in.
Call.
Call.
It feels like a cooler, but it's not.
Three.
Chip it.
Wow. 5-betting queens, because it's Matt Berkey. Before the flop came, I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I think Berkey's caging them.
I mean, it's a cooler. I don't think it's a cage.
Yeah, it's a cooler, right? But yeah, I know.
It's a good flop to shove
Yeah.
against my
All
queen.
right, putting my headphones back on. Hopefully I get kings too. Wow, Berk. A lot of skill.
In the middle of hands when you're not in it and people are taking a little while to exhaust their thought process, I think it's really important to have a very good playlist.
You have to be pretty mentally present. But I was wavering back and forth between hardcore gangster rap and Ed Sheeran. I was trying to achieve balance by hitting both extremes of aggressiveness and just sheer and utter depression.
I crowdsourced my playlist on Twitter. Some of the songs on the playlist were heavy metal, and it was just a little too intense for me.
People might think this is weird, but I really like this song that played. It was the first time I listened to it, so I just hit the repeat button and I just let it play throughout the whole time.
What was the song?
I don't remember anymore.
I have wore headphones while playing poker one time in the past maybe 4 years.
Yeah, poker's very social, and then an interaction and seeing how people do certain things. is really important. But in this dynamic, it's a little different.
It would be pretty detrimental, I think, if it was like 5 amateurs, where it's going to be really important to calibrate what's going on in my environment by like listening to them speak and determining if you think they're intelligent or if you think that, you know, they don't have very much poker sense or whatever the case may be.
It's not like playing online, and it's not your normal live environment either. It's some mix in between.
It's just you and your mind and the physical actions of someone.
It's not that great to play with friends and remove the jabs and the banter, but I still think that there's enough downtime in between hands where people have their headphones paused or whatever that you can kind of work in a jab or two.
Probably the bottom of my opening range in this spot.
35?
This is a hand that, you know, this deep, I'm very, very often going to 3-bet. I think it is important to have a mixed strategy, but especially given my dynamic against Nick, I'm going to go for it.
One time.
Okay, so this spot has presented itself a multitude of times now. Jack's very clearly targeting Nick's wide opens. I have a hand that probably serves to be a fold, but to be quite fair, this is also one of my, I guess, more interesting hands that I would be defending the big from. I'm actually going to elect to 4-bet rather small here. I want to preface this with that I kind of hate it, and I would like to just be calling in this spot, but my hand's way too weak and deserves initiative if it's going to continue in any capacity. So I'm just going to pretty much 4-bet to a size that will allow me to take initiative and still have playability post.
So I'm expecting Berkey to be a little bit more polarized out of the big blind facing an open and a 3-bet for myself. I do think it could be a bit wider just because I've 3-bet Nick so many times. Although I don't think he would necessarily expect me to alter my preflop strategy a lot based on my history with Nick. This is a close spot because I think I dominate a ton of Berkey's 3-bet range. I'm not in love with playing post-flop at all, in position or out of position against Berkey, but I think that in order to defend my raise call range, I should be flatting this at some frequency, and I would rather have a suited combo to 5-bet here. And so I'm going to keep Berkey's range wide and play this through a call.
So we pretty much got the desired result. This is going to be one of the more ideal flops we're going to see. I think most of his ace-x is going to be incentivized to 5-bet. Pretty much his ace-kings, ace-deuce, ace-3, ace-4, ace-5. I doubt he's flatting many of those. I flop a flush draw, and though I am rather pair-heavy here, I have a 3-barrel candidate, I believe. I could check and protect my checking range a little bit by having this hand included in my check raises. But the issue with that becomes, I think he's just going to have a hand that realizes most of the time and wants to check back, unless he has a hand like ace-jack or ace-10, in which case I'm not so sure that a check raise is actually going to serve me well. So I'm actually going to continue for a bit of a larger sizing here, as I think he thinks my pairs would probably pot control a little bit more.
I think there's an interesting case for raising on an ace-high board when I flat ace-king pre-flop. This is not that board, especially with my holdings. Part of the reason is that Berkey's cold 4, I think especially if he's a little bit more polarized, is pretty likely to include wheel aces. So there's two combos of ace deuce, one combo of ace five suited. Without the king of diamonds, I would more strongly consider raising, but given that I have so little to protect against, I want to just keep Berkey's range wide. I think he's going to have a fairly large double barreling frequency as a bluff. Also, I think Berkey is the type to bet a lot of big pairs on this board, even when most players wouldn't. I think I can get value from those later, but I think that most of those would fold to a flop raise.
Okay, so this is rather interesting. I'm putting him on mainly ace jack, ace 10. That becomes a bit problematic for me. I think he could have certain combinations of hearts. King, queen would probably be the only logical float there. Of course, he has like some combinations of ace 5, ace deuce. Seems even less likely now that the ace appears. So he actually may just have bigger diamond draws than me. I actually really like going for a 2x pot shove here, or 1.5x pot shove here. Sure, he's just gonna have some ace x to call me, but I'm already so pulled, given my action thus far, that I think when I jam, he can't really expect to find too many of my merged hands, like kings or queens or anything to that nature. So I'm gonna give the fake look back as if I'm checking to see if my ace possesses a heart, and then I'm gonna be all in. I'm all in.
It's all in? Well, this is a spot where I'm just, if he's got the boat, I'm happy to pay him off.
Okay, so I ran into the top of range, which I think is quite reasonable. He has a hand that if he wants to catch me bluffing with, he should possess in his range. I think my shove serves me pretty well. I think he will just have a fair amount of better diamond draws. He should have king, queen, queen, jack, probably king, jack, jack 10 as well. Possibly even some of the suited connector varieties, though I would anticipate that a hand like 5-6 of diamonds would fold pre-flop. However, if he does possess 5x of diamonds, those are more hands that I have pretty poor equity against, that I think I possess a lot of fold equity against. So just kind of an unfortunate spot.
So I think it's interesting that Berkey had a 7-10 suited here. I'm not sure that that's necessarily a standard 3-bet for him. So I do think, or sorry, 4-bet, cold 4. So I do think my decision to flat ace king preflop looks even better in hindsight, given he's going to have hands like that I assume are snap folding to a 5-bet. Obviously a really fortunate board for me. I don't think I'm stacking Berkey that often. When he cold 4s 7-10 of diamonds, but I'll take it.